This state of play production is made possible by the generous support of Biogen, where science meets humanity.
Welcome, Professor Peniel Joseph. It's a delight to have you with us. And of course, for our audience, they should know that you are the founding director of the Center for the Study of Race and Democracy at the University of Texas at Austin, one of your many posts there. Delighted to have you with us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
We are reflecting today on the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC. Where do you think SNCC stands within that pantheon of civil rights organizations?
Yeah, Mayor Pratt, SNCC is really the most important grassroots civil rights organization of the post-war period. So it starts in 1960. It's founded by Ella Jo Baker, who's an extraordinary Black feminist and organizer. It's going to cultivate both Black and white students to come to the South to try to transform American democracy through everything from voter registration, civics classes, and even before Freedom Summer of 1964, SNCC cultivates Black women and men who become generative leaders and organizers and activists. And they go into different communities like Ruleville, Mississippi, and help cultivate the leadership and activism of people like Fannie Lou Hamer. So when we think about SNCC is going to introduce second wave Black feminism. It's going to introduce a new generation of Black anti-war activism, anti-imperialist activism, certainly Black nationalism, radical democracy. So SNCC becomes a forerunner of aspects of the Black Lives Matter movement, aspects of people like Stacey Abrams and the fantastic voting rights activism they've done, Sherilyn Ifill, Legal Defense Fund, elected officials, including folks like yourself who become this new wave of Black mayors and the Congressional Black Caucus. All of that is connected to SNCC, but also SNCC is connected to earlier iterations of Black activism through Ella Baker and through James Lawson and through these different organizers that mentor SNCC, including Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. So it's really this unbelievably generative organization, which still doesn't get the credit it deserves today.
Well, you know, the thing that has always grabbed me about SNCC was how many once college students got involved at a time when it was awfully important for African Americans to get a college degree. It was not the easiest thing to do. I mean, what was it you think grabbed them and made them say, listen, some left college? What do you think was the impetus? What was the force that brought them together?
Well, I think the force is going to be both religious and secular. So people like Bob Moses, Ruby Doris Smith Robinson, obviously Diane Nash is both SCLC and SNCC, the John Lewises, the Bernard Lafayettes, the Stokely Carmichaels. There's just so many people, the Gwen Patton, the Fran Beals, so many people are part of SNCC. I think what brings them together is this idea of Black dignity and citizenship. You know, SNCC was really inspired by a vision of American democracy that was rooted in Black freedom struggles going back to the Reconstruction period. So in a way, when we think about what SNCC believed in, they believed in radical democracy, Black dignity, and Black citizenship more than mainstream politicians. So they believed in John Kennedy's new frontier more than Kennedy did, because they saw themselves as active leaders and change makers and transformational figures within that movement. But it's really not just the students. It is about the sharecroppers. It is about people who were not provided formal education, who slept in shotgun shacks in Alabama, the Black Belt in Alabama, in the Mississippi Delta, in Arkansas, in Southwest Georgia, in Albany, Georgia. SNCC really venerated poor Black people. They loved poor Black people, Black women, men, children, those who were infirmed and disabled. And they felt that those folks should be not just viewed as citizens, but viewed as leaders of this new vision for American democracy and the creation of what King called the beloved community.
And maybe like Black Lives Matter, they were less top down and, they sort of believed in percolating up that power. Is that a fair characterization?
Oh, absolutely. SNCC believes in non-hierarchical leadership. Academics have called it participatory democracy, but certainly Ella Baker said that strong people don't need strong leaders. And when we think about the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, they really impact the entire structure of American democracy, both by the sit-ins they organized in 1960 and 61, but also Bob Moses going to Macomb, Mississippi, and trying to bring small d democracy and witnessing people being murdered by law enforcement right in front of his eyes, by elected officials in front of his eyes, and being incarcerated for murders that white people committed, and still being committed to voting rights and being committed to transforming American democracy. So they did this kind of heroic root work, but again, they were connected to earlier iterations. So SNCC is connected to the Southern Negro Youth Congress, which is going to feature Sally Davis and feature all these radicals who are connected to different left-wing groups and organizations in the 1930s and 1940s. And in turn, those groups were connected to early 20th century efforts to transform Jim Crow and democracy. And then those groups were connected to Reconstruction era efforts. So SNCC is part of a line of Black radical activists who've tried to reshape American democracy in the face of what Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture called raw terror. So SNCC faced the same kind of terror that our ancestors faced in the late 19th century, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, and they faced it unarmed. So they went into the belly of the beast, and they really inspired millions of people, Black as well as white, that they could actually change an evil system just by bearing witness to that system and trying to organize against that system.
You had the privilege of knowing Stokely when we were students at Howard University. And I'm curious to know why you chose Stokely, because there were a great many people who came out of that SNCC movement. You said I was the beneficiary, but there were those who were really engaged with SNCC. For example, in Washington, we had Marion Barry, we had John Wilson, we had Dave Clark, we had Frank Smith, Eleanor Holmes Norton, all were a part of SNCC. You had Julian Bond, you had Bob Moses. Why did you select, and of course, John Lewis, why did you select Stokely Carmichael?
Well, I think, Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture is just this really protean generative figure who, by examining his life, you're able to get to the lives of so many different people. He's from the Caribbean, so he gives us that African diasporic flavor. Mayor Pratt, Howard University is a global university that he went to. So it's Toni Morrison, but it's also, the sons and daughters of African and Caribbean leaders and prime ministers and folks who became leaders in their country. So Stokely Carmichael gives us a way into the Caribbean, into Howard University, into Harlem and the Bronx, and also into the Nonviolent Action Group, NAG, that was one of the most robust facets of the SNCC organization. And I think Stokely is a great person to look at because Stokely is a nonviolent activist who becomes this revolutionary Black power leader, but he's somebody who knows Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., is mentored by Ella Baker, reveres Fannie Lou Hamer. So he's just a very, very interesting figure, and of course becomes Kwame Ture and this leader of the All African People's Revolutionary Party in the 1970s and 80s. So I just think he's an incredibly interesting figure. And you mentioned John Lewis. John Lewis is a figure who's also incredibly interesting, and SNCC just produces these leaders, whether they're folks like Fannie Lou Hamer or folks like Stokely. So whether they're students or just ordinary people, SNCC really inspires people to do extraordinary things.
Well, thank you for giving us this historical parameter. You put it put it in context so that we can really grasp it, not only where we are today, but, you know, the importance of that significance of these Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, their role in American history, a real inflection point in America. And as we stand at the precipice of major change now, I think you helped us grasp it better. So thank you so very much. And I'll quote a SCLC guy now, Jesse Jackson. What we'll do is keep hope alive. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mayor Pratt. Thank you.